Okay, so now how does the hypothalamus command these two glands? Now let's discuss the release commands from the hypothalamus. Okay, so hypothalamus, kind of the command center. This communicates with both the anterior pituitary gland and the posterior pituitary gland. This one is by the hypophyseal portal system, and this is by the pituitary stalk. Pituitary stalk. Okay, now this would reach its targets, so whatever the target tissue, by the circulatory system. So circulatory system. Okay, let's list our hormones from before. The first one is, it was follicle stimulating hormone. And the command for this, well, let's first see where it goes. Let's give this some space. Okay, so we know the FSH, oops, switch that. This goes to the gonads. This will help us figure out the name for the command from the hypothalamus. Its command is actually called gonadotropin. So there's that word gonad. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay, so you see this word gonad, that's the release command, because eventually it's going to reach the gonads. Our next hormone was LH. This actually has the same release command from the hypothalamus. This also goes to the gonads. Our next homework was adrenocorticotropic hormone. The name tells me this is going to go to the adrenal cortex. The command for this hormone, it's corticotropic releasing hormone. Corticotropic. You'll notice a lot of these commands end with releasing hormone. So there's that releasing hormone, here's releasing hormone. Okay, next was, this one's pretty simple. For thyroid stimulating hormone, the name tells us this is going to go to the thyroid gland. The command hormone for this is actually just called thyroid releasing hormone. So not too bad. Thyroid releasing hormone. Okay, next is P in flat peg. Now here is the important exception. Next is prolactin. We know prolactin is going to target the mammary glands in a female's breast. Mammary gland in breasts. And this is for milk production. We know this is going to stimulate milk production. Milk production. Okay. Now we don't want this hormone turned on at all times, because if there's no need to produce milk, we don't want this occurring for no reason. So actually, the command from the hypothalamus is an inhibitory command. The sideways T means inhibits, and this is always turned on until one specific event happens. So what keeps this in check at all times is called prolactin inhibiting factor. Prolactin inhibiting factor. So here's a difference from all the other flat peg hormones. So what actually turns off prolactin inhibiting factor is the hormones after childbirth. That combination and concentration of those hormones, the pregnancy hormones, can turn off PIF, prolactin inhibiting factor. Once we turn on prolactin inhibiting factor, we can start milk production. Prolactin inhibiting factor. Next was endorphins. And we mentioned before, but endorphins have, we have many things that can cause the release of endorphins. And just to repeat them, one could be stress, Nothing specific from the hypothalamus. We have stress, we have pain can cause this. We also have exercise. Okay. After that was growth hormone. Growth hormone, we know this indirectly targets our muscles and bones, among other things. We know we have to bypass the liver first, muscle and bone. The release command from the hypothalamus doesn't have a really creative name. It's actually just called growth hormone, and then we add that commonly used ending, releasing hormone. So this is the command for that. Growth hormone, releasing hormone. And that is all our flat peg hormones. Made a, let's see, hypothalamus target. Yeah, not sure why I included this. We're not going to mention oxytocin and ADH for now. So we'll just concern ourselves with the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, so now here is a picture of a pituitary gland. Now how do we tell which part is which? Well, 3 looks like it's a little bridge. This is actually the pituitary stalk. Pituitary stalk. And we know this directly connects to the posterior pituitary gland. So this tells me that number 2 is actually the posterior pituitary gland. And then by default, 1 has to be the anterior pituitary gland. So this was the APG. But you might not always have a clearly defined pituitary stalk. So the best way to tell which lobe is which is usually the darker one. The more stained one is usually the anterior pituitary gland. So more stained, it appears darker, this is a safer way to tell that this is the anterior pituitary gland. And we know hormones produced by each of these regions. Okay, next is the thyroid gland. Where can we find this guy? You actually have to look at the trachea. So let's take a ventral view of our trachea. Kind of looks like this. We know inside it's surrounded by cartilage rings. So sitting on the trachea, we have this gland, and it is butterfly shaped, more or less butterfly shaped on the trachea. Okay, so this guy here, this butterfly shape, this is your thyroid gland. This is your thyroid gland. Okay, again, this is the trachea. Trachea. And this guy here, this is your thyroid gland. And this structure secretes thyroxine. Secretes a hormone known as thyroxine. And we'll discuss 2 functions for thyroxine. One is it regulates metabolism, which we'll speak about more right in a sec. And second function is it's required for mental development. So it's required for proper mental development. So if this hormone is absent, so let's say if this is absent during your young development, it will lead to mental retardation, so stunted growth. It will lead to mental retardation. We would call this condition cretinism. Cretinism. Okay, now let's discuss more about the metabolic part of thyroxine, especially if you have too much or not enough of this hormone floating around. Okay, so thyroxine pathologies. Let's first discuss hyperthyroidism. So hyper means you have more than a normal amount of thyroxine in your system. So in this condition, we have fast metabolism, which can lead to a few other things. Weight loss, for example, your body cannot build up, it's constantly breaking down stored compounds. Weight loss. This condition, we also have muscle weakness. Again, you're breaking down your structural proteins. Muscle weakness. People with this condition could have elevated blood pressure and heart rate. Elevated blood pressure and heart rate. So this is for hyperthyroidism. For hypo means you don't have enough, but in a pathological and a dangerous amount. Here you would have a quote-unquote slow metabolism. This is where your body cannot break it down fast enough or enough, so this can lead to a weight gain. And people with this condition, they'll be lethargic, sleepy, tired and weak. So that's the metabolic consequences for thyroxine. Okay, now for the parathyroid. To find the parathyroid, you have to take a back view, a dorsal view of the trachea. So let me take looking at the trachea from the back. This will tell us where our parathyroid is. Okay, so here is my trachea. You can see these rings, adjacent rings. Remember, this is the back view, so we still have to include the thyroid, but on the front side. So here's the quadrants of my butterfly from the back side. Let's use this color. In each of these quadrants, there is a small region. These guys here, these are your parathyroids. Parathyroid literally means next to the thyroid. These are, well, they're kind of within the same structure, but these are your parathyroids. So here is parathyroid. So is that one. And these guys secrete something called parathyroid hormone, or PTH. Parathyroid hormone. Well, let's discuss the effect of what PTH does. It tells your bones to secrete more calcium into your circulatory system. Whenever your blood calcium levels are low, you can expect PTH to be active. Okay, so let's see how this happens. Here is my circulatory system. Somewhere is being bordered by a bone. And step one would be, your body detects low blood calcium level. Body detects low blood calcium level. We know we have calcium stored in our bones. One function of our bones, it can store. So we have calcium in the bones. This is going to cause step number 2. We're going to tell the parathyroid, or another gland is going to tell the parathyroid to secrete PTH. Parathyroid to secrete our parathyroid hormone, PTH. Okay, so here is the back of the trachea. There is the trachea. We have our quadrants. These guys are going to secrete our, via the bloodstream. They're going to secrete our PTH. So there's our PTH. It's going to travel in the bloodstream, and it's going to enter the bones and command it to do something. So we're going to have an effect here. So there's my effect arrows. Something's happening here. Step 3, it's going to enter these cells, and the bone is going to release calcium into the circulatory system. Release calcium into the bloodstream. Into the bloodstream. So there's calcium going into the bloodstream. There's calcium, and we'll finish this off in the next video.